I'm sharing my story pertaining to what has happened in my life in my experience with transgression, repentance, and salvation. In this story I will share many of my experiences and the story of how I became addicted to drugs, started my journey into dishonorable activities, became severely addicted, ended up homeless, was arrested and detained over 50 times, and became severely afflicted, eventually going to prison, then finding Yahuah. Once I became a practicing believer, the process of my redemption began and the restoration of my life was then underway. A lot has happened in my life and it was by far not the usual human experience. Some of the things I will talk about may be hard to believe, but I am going to do my best effort to be truthful and articulate in a way that is understandable. During this journey I have learned that Yahuah is in control and He does have a plan for us, and the way Yahuah does things is so amazing to me that I want to share it with others and give Him the glory for what has happened in my life. My story verifies the power that Yahuah has to restore and renew our minds and change us to make our lives so much better than if we were to do it with our own thinking. When I tried to do things my own way, without Yahuah, most of the time I fell short and ended up in trouble, causing problems, and doing damage to myself. I know this is not the case for everyone, but my story shows if Yahuah can do it for me, He can do it for anyone. I am not going to deny the power of Yahuah. There is no limit to Yahuah. I'm hopeful and excited about the future that Yahuah has planned for us the people. I have learned a lot in life and I understand now that everything has happened for a reason, and now that Yahuah has been restoring me I have found meaning and purpose in life. I grew up in Rodeo, California and was born in Vallejo, California. My dad was a carpenter and my mom worked with children. I had asthma when I was young and my mom gave me treatments with a machine. I would eventually grow it, but it was an issue when I was younger. Other than that I was pretty well. I had no mental illnesses and teachers often recognized me for being smart. I had an early introduction to spirituality. I learned about Yahushua and some of the stories of the scriptures. It was a good foundation for me, to have a basic understanding about spirituality, and at a young age I had accepted and believed in Yahuah. When I was at school at some type of assembly, they were having a raffle and I remember right before the raffle, I prayed to Yahuah asking Him to win. That raffle I not only won once, but won twice. That was the first time I remember praying and having my prayers answered, right away. Like many children I liked playing video games, so that addiction started early. Some games were fun and educational, others were just violent. This took up a lot of my time and that's what I wanted to do most the time. I liked Star Wars and I also liked watching movies with my dad like sci-fi, and also started watching Star Trek at a young age. My dad watched a lot of war documentaries and I would sometimes watch with him, so I had an interest in military history. Early in life my dad showed me some basic things with electricity, and also he let me play with tools and I would often be around him while he was working in the garage. What he showed me sparked my thinking at an early age. I eventually went into the Gifted and Talented Education GATE program in elementary school. I enjoyed going to that class because we did science experiments and received a break from our regular classes. We dissected small animals, worked with electricity, built boats, and even did a mock trial. But after a while, I lost interest and dropped out. School stopped mattering to me, and I just pushed through each day without purpose. I now see that TV, video games, poisoned food, and the agenda hidden in the school system were the cause. I remember the excitement of getting into the online multiplayer gaming, and spending many hours doing that. I can remember a day where I played the computer for 17 hours straight. When I made it to high school, I really enjoyed playing football. I was able to play for my freshman year, and the bad thing that happened after that was I had house one day and one of them had a blunt of marijuana. I decided to try it. I laughed for about 1 or 2 hours and had so much fun that I wanted to keep doing it, eventually trying alcohol too. This was when I was 14 or so. It started off every now and then and eventually turned into an everyday thing and I wanted to do it all the time. Then I really started doing bad in school. I eventually started getting into trouble and ended up in the system with probation. That's really when everything started for me, around age 15. I also started selling drugs with a friend at a young age so I could support my habit and have extra money. With probation I couldn't smoke marijuana, so I thought it was a good idea to sell it and do the things that I could get away with, like drinking. I eventually went into a program called Tahoe Turning Point. Looking back, it was the best part of my juvenile life. It was rehab-based, but it didn't feel like rehab at all. We lived in a normal house with a house manager and a program manager. I was able to go to school, play football again, work at Jamba Juice, and I had a girlfriend during that time. I met a great friend there who helped me get into bodybuilding. He was also into martial arts and taught me a bit, but I was mainly interested in the bodybuilding. He showed me things I had never even thought about. He gave me Arnold Schwarzenegger's new Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding and let me borrow Pumping Iron. The book was useful because it explained specific exercises for every muscle group. I liked the movie as well, and after watching it, Arnold became my favorite bodybuilder. I was successful at bodybuilding, I was pretty big and in good shape, I was able to bench press 350 pounds once at the age of 18. It felt really good working out. We used to train for 1 or 2 hours sometimes, and by the end of the workout it was a great feeling. When I came home was my most memorable experience, when I opened the door to my room and was able to see my cat Mickey. I've always loved cats. The truth is, I wasn't done with drugs yet. I still wanted the rush and the party lifestyle. I had $700 saved up, bought a bunch of ecstasy pills, and went right back into partying, mostly ecstasy and alcohol. I threw parties at my parents' house when they weren't home, letting in people who had zero respect for the place. I'd clean for hours afterward, and even then, I usually ended up in trouble. One of those nights was the first time I tried crystal meth. We went around stealing things and I started making different kinds of bad decisions. While I was in trouble with probation doing work details, I had met someone that ended up seeking me out at a party a couple years later. Then I saw him at the store and he pulled out a big bag of crystal meth and said, "I got it." I started buying it from him after that. My friend showed me how to do it and it was different from anything I had done before. My addiction went from every now and then to a regular everyday thing. I eventually learned how to sell it and was making money that way and using every day. I progressed in this area, meeting people, and getting more and more addicted, and because I had more available than before, I was using it such that it eventually made me sick. I was laying around, not wanting to do much. During this time period I started getting arrested. I kept going to jail, so frequently, that one of the staff told me that it was my 14th time there in 1 year. I was so addicted that hearing that wasn't even a big deal to me. I kept trying to sell meth over the years, and the more I used it the less capable I was at making any progress, or getting anything done. That's how I ended up homeless, from doing meth and messing up my relationship with my family. When I became homeless I sold meth as a way to support my habit and make progress in the wrong way. None of it was actual progress, it was dishonorable behavior, and the further my addiction went the worse things progressed. I eventually was released from jail one time and asked if I could live with family again. The opportunity was given to me several times, but one of the times I reached out to one of the people I had met when I was selling meth, who had mentioned black magic to me. I decided one day and I told him I was interested. What happened after that was terrible. When I met up with him, we used meth again, and he started telling me things. He started giving me strange and abnormal ways to think about things that really messed me up and took a long time for me to return to normal thinking. One of the things he said was that we would be able to communicate without even talking. I then first started hearing internal voices inside my head. Nothing good came out of us interacting. He eventually dropped me off in Rodeo and I started using meth again regularly. Some people let me live with them, the using continued, and the voices started to get worse. My addiction was getting worse too. I lost about 70 pounds in 2 months because where I was living there was little food and the meth made it worse. Going further and further into addiction, the voices worsened, and I didn't even really know what I was dealing with. I eventually ended up homeless again, and I believe that's when my situation worsened. The further I did addiction and transgression, the more things I started to see. One of the common misconceptions that society has is when you see something irregular while using drugs, a lot of people will think or say something about drugs, and/or hallucinating, like it didn't happen, it wasn't really there, or you just imagined it, things like that. This is a falsehood. These things are really happening and we're seeing it for a reason. Oftentimes drugs can open people up to see things that people normally can't see. The abandoned building I stayed in was the Veterans Hall, the same place where my dad practiced karate, so it meant a lot to me. I set up a bed there and lived inside for a while. At one point, there was a remarkable holographic image within the wall, a space station. Eventually, the person I had been warned to avoid came into the Veterans Hall and used drugs. After that, the holographic image of the space station had been ripped out of the wall, and the interior had been violated. Dark images were smeared across the walls, and I could sense that something had shifted, that something was wrong. This wasn't a regular picture of a space station, it wasn't even physical. Eventually I would end up being sent to prison. I had always wondered what it would be like to go to prison, and I finally was able to find out. I was extremely anxious and nervous about what I did. I was concerned that I was going to do life in prison. I was allowed to stay out of jail for the most part until they finally charged me, and then when I was finally arrested, it was done, the anxiety was gone, I wasn't worried anymore, and I had peace of mind. Committing the act that sent me to prison was basically the beginning of my redemption and process of me turning my life around through the correctional process in the system, and when I would begin to read the scriptures regularly and started having a relationship with Yahuah. I had always wondered what it would be like to go to prison, but I never really had an idea of what it would be like until I went. At that point I was so severely hurt that oftentimes people would say bad things to me and I wouldn't even know what to say back. I felt like the people saying these things had a big advantage because they were not as hurt as I was. When people do something or say something to you, it's often a good idea to say something to them, in a respectful way, but earlier, I didn't even have that ability. I did notice though, that once I started reading the scriptures, I started having a little more courage to be more vocal. But I did notice the beginning of better habits when I started my fellowship as a believer. There were many inappropriate things I said and did, just like the people around me, and I didn't understand the impact of any of it. One of my first steps was trying to stop cursing and speaking inappropriately. It wasn't easy at first, and using better words felt uncomfortable, but eventually it became a habit. It's important to keep our language clean. I laid down one night and was falling asleep and started praying. The prayer was only about 5 to 7 seconds long, and immediately following the prayer, a powerful feeling filled my brain. It lasted around 12 seconds. I woke up to find that the voices were completely gone and I had peace and comfort restored to my mind. At that point I thought that I was better. I was thankful that Yahuah did that, but I did not seek a relationship with him at that point. I thought it was over. I didn't even make an effort to read the scriptures. Then within 2 months or so the voices came back. It was the same as before and I was back to having the extreme discomfort in my head that I was used to. I ended up being transferred to a different prison, and eventually I walked into a room and one of the men I met asked me, "Do you want some of that?" I was surprised and didn't know what it was because I had never seen it in there before, but I quickly agreed to do it when I learned that it was meth, so I started using again. I used about 20 to 30 times when I was in prison. Eventually one day when I was at work in the kitchen, I was feeling guilty about using the previous night. I then had the thought, I'm going to service. I then felt uplifted immediately. So I started to go to service, and eventually one of the ministers gave me a copy of the scriptures. It was hard to pay attention while sitting in service, but it was a good place for me to be. Sometimes I would even start falling asleep. I didn't really have good habits back then, would often read the scriptures and then go and transgress right away. Right after reading the scriptures my friend and I would sit down and drink our coffee and talk about bad things. It was early in my fellowship with the Most High and I didn't really know any better yet. I was still using here and there, and every time I did, I lost there to read the scriptures for several days. Then I would slowly return to them. The old saying fits, the scriptures keep you from transgression, but transgression keeps you from the scriptures. One of the friends that I met while I was in prison gave me a great compliment. He told me that out of everyone he had seen in prison, he told me that I was the most serious about my belief. He was very encouraging. I know that when things are said they are often said for a reason, and Yahuah meant for you to hear those things stay with you for the rest of your life. It's something to appreciate. When I asked a friend what it took to stop using, he told me, "It takes a made-up mind," so I moved forward with his advice. Following that, I told the minister at the assembly I was going to that I was still struggling with addiction, and he prayed for me in his truck. Shortly after that, I was delivered. Quitting drugs, alcohol, and cigarettes were some of the better decisions I made. Oftentimes it's not an easy for me, it took a lot of practice. For the drugs, it probably took about 10 tries or less once I was making an effort, until I was completely delivered from it. As far as alcohol, I drank one day and walked inside feeling sick and I threw up. This had happened many times before when I was younger, but this time was different. After that I never wanted to drink again. I stopped drinking. The cigarettes were the hardest thing to quit. I quit cigarettes about 2 months after I quit the drugs and alcohol. It took a long time to quit cigarettes successfully. It took around 2 years and over 40 tries of quitting, but eventually I was finally delivered. After the cigarette cravings were taken away from me, I never even came close to having another cigarette, maybe only slightly thinking about it a few times since then. Every now and then I'll see someone with a cigarette and think that it looks kind of enticing, but I'm finished forever now, and will never go back to that. Moving forward from the drugs, alcohol and cigarettes, to feel abundant joy. When I finally quit the cigarettes, the joy was the best I had ever felt. Those were my 3 vices that held me back for many years. After I quit those 3 things, I continued to make progress, repenting of too much TV watching and video games. I also began to be interested in the wellness aspect of what kind of food and drink I was putting into my body. Making positive changes in my eating changed a lot for me. I have more energy now and feel a lot better. Quitting caffeine was a good choice too. I had heard that when you quit drinking caffeine, you have more natural energy, so I tried quitting and it only took about 3 tries to quit drinking coffee. On the 3rd try I was done. It's true, the longer you stay off of caffeine the more you get used to it and don't need it anymore. Learning nutrition, natural remedies, and wellness activities will also change your life for the better. I wanted to list the things that I quit or repented of in degree from hardest to easiest. Some were quit completely, like the drugs, alcohol, and cigarettes, and the others were greatly reduced as I'm still working on it or being more mindful of my habits. It goes cigarettes, drugs, sodas, junk food, fast food, coffee, television, video games. In quitting each of these things I experienced a major improvement in my life. I also repented of psychiatric mind-altering medication, putting my trust in Yahuah instead of having to use drugs every day, or taking a shot every 3 months. To me that is a huge waste of money, for something that doesn't even do what it is supposed to do. I have tried about 8 different medications and cocktails for the voices I had been hearing and they never did what they were supposed to do. I want to be careful about saying they did anything, because to be honest they reduced the volume and pain just a little bit. Say if the problem was a 10 then they may have taken it down to a 9 instead of the 10. For the little effect that they did have, the better choice is to refuse any type of mind-altering medication. When you're not using mind-altering drugs, I believe it honors Yahuah and you will also feel way better about yourself. I'm not saying that will always be easy, but I believe it's worth it. When I repented of the things that were holding me back, and stopped looking for ineffective solutions, amazing things started happening, and still are happening to this day. Since I've been drug-free for about 4 years now, Yahuah has been showing things to me and guiding me, taking me to places that I never imagined. Now I realize that things happen for a reason. Even if bad things happen to you, Yahuah can take those things and give you wisdom from them and make good things happen. Opposed to if you were not of belief, those things may have been for nothing. Even further, they were there to hurt you. Without Yahuah, a lot of these issues and traumas of the past may still be holding you back. He gives us a way to make it through things and barak us in ways that we never imagined. We can be set free from our demons and traumas. We say Yahuah every time we breathe, and also have Yahuah written on our face, Y between the eyes, A for the nose, H for the mouth. There is a common belief that a believer cannot have a demon. This creates problems for believers when adhering to this teaching. When anyone accepts this, a believer will not even think it's possible for a demon to be inside of them, so they will be ignorant of their need for deliverance. To be delivered from a demon, I recommend you start sharing the Besorah, read the scriptures regularly, fast every day, and repent of any transgression you are aware of. Reading the scriptures and asking will any transgression currently holding you back will move you forward towards your deliverance from demons. The Savior's true name is pronounced Yahushua. For any believers watching this, please honor the 10 Commandments and correct names and titles given to the Creator and Messiah. It's been more than 2 years since I wrote my story. Since then I have been providing intelligence contributing to the national code. I have provided internal mechanical system recovery and restoration code intelligence that this country has needed for many years. My code intelligence has surpassed the most advanced systems in the armed forces, with no equal in the field. Over the course of the last 3 years they have tortured me and have refused to pay me anything for the work I've done. I have been providing intelligence and solutions in a way that no one else has been capable of doing. In this situation, the surprising thing is, you would expect someone providing this kind of service would be treated very well, instead they are wrong. Shortly after I contacted them, they engaged an automatic attack system against me. The effect of this was it caused me to display bad behavior, far beyond anything I would have ever done to anyone, showing that the system they are using is a very bad system. The people behind it are wicked people and they are associated with the forces of darkness. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, and against the worldly governors, the princes of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness, that are in high places. I just read to you the pre-edit version from the scriptures, that indicates the worldly governors are associated with the forces of darkness, verifying that the governments are associated with evil. Identity falsification is used against the person, using locals in the population to attack them. Electronic warfare, making harmful sounds go through the house, playing harmful sounds in the background from television, computer, car sound, making threats to the person, threatening to kill them and their family. Misusing communication and intentionally combining words and phrases meant to cause harm. Causing pain to shoot through the person's body. The people involved in this operation causing harm to me are misusing national resources and creating a national security threat. They have hindered my ability to provide intelligence by harming me with their overbearing attempts to control me. Their control system is a failed system. They've been using it for 3 years and it still doesn't work. They cannot control me with it. As you can see and hear right now, I'm telling you about it regardless of any action they choose to take against me. Regardless of all this, I believe I'll end up being okay. As it teaches us in the scriptures that we are to be joyful as we go through trials and that Yahuah is with us while we go through them. It's better for us to fear Yahuah rather than to fear men. When we fear men, that is something that the enemy. It is written, when a man's ways please Yahuah, he makes even his enemies to be at peace with him. We are also instructed in the scriptures not to worry, because by worrying we add nothing to ourselves. There's no benefit to it. Oftentimes when we are experiencing what one would associate with as fear, it's oftentimes a false feeling being put in us by demonic forces, when we really don't have to fear the thing that is troubling us. We should all fear Yahuah. Fearing Yahuah is the beginning of wisdom. Yahuah is the one that can destroy our souls for eternity. For those that think they are getting away with anything, everyone will be accountable for the evils they have committed in acts of transgression. Whether his followers are held accountable for their transgressions or only are acknowledged for the good things they've done, I don't know. I do know to question the things I've been taught in the past. It's also a decision to be made by Yahuah. Thank you for listening to my story.